Isabelle never meant to be part of Nathaniel Carrington's world. A simple mix-up with a delivery sent her to his doorstep, and suddenly she was at his glamorous gala, surrounded by luxury she could never afford. Keep watching, because this is just the beginning of a story where chance and choice collide in unexpected ways. Isabelle's world had always been one of quiet struggle. Her flower shop, inherited from her late mother, was the only thing she had left. Every morning, she opened the shop door, hoping for a miracle, but the constant hum of the bell above the entrance was often the only sound she heard. Customers were rare, and with each passing day, she felt the weight of the bills piling up, the creeping sense of inevitability that her dream, her mother's dream, would soon slip through her fingers. She had always loved flowers, the way they bloomed, fragile yet fierce, their beauty fleeting but undeniable. It was how she had learned to cope with life's fleeting nature. When her mother had passed away, Isabelle felt a gaping hole, an emptiness that she had tried so hard to fill with work, with the promise of success. But there was no joy in the shop anymore, no laughter, no hope. Isabelle had sacrificed so much to care for her mother, her dreams, her independence, even her chance at a different life. When she was younger, she'd imagined herself in a world far beyond this small town, a life full of color and adventure, free from the suffocating responsibility of caring for her mother's illness. But that was not the life she had been given. Isabelle's sacrifices had become her identity, her reason for existing. She had poured every ounce of her energy into the flower shop, even when she felt the world outside was moving on without her. There had been a man once, Lucas, a bright-eyed college student, full of ambition, with dreams of traveling the world. Isabelle had loved him with everything she had. He had been the first person who made her believe that life could be more than the small corner she had built for herself. Together, they had talked about starting a life outside the shop, about building something together. But as her mother's health declined, Lucas had slowly drifted away. His dreams of travel and adventure didn't mesh with the reality of Isabelle's obligations. He could live in the shadow of her responsibilities. One night, he left without a word, without so much as a goodbye. She had waited for him to return, to explain, to fight for them. But the calls stopped coming. The texts grew fewer, and soon he was nothing more than a memory, a ghost that haunted her every step. Isabelle had tried to forget, tried to move on, but the weight of abandonment lingered in her heart like a scar that wouldn't heal. Her world became smaller after that. Her mother was gone, and with her, any chance of starting over. The flower shop, once a place of joy, now felt like a tomb. The walls seemed to close in on her with every passing day. She kept the doors open, even when the shop felt empty, even when the flower arrangements gathered dust. She stayed because that was what she knew. She stayed because, at least in the shop, she could pretend that everything was still okay. But Isabelle was tired of fighting, tired of waiting for a life that would never come. She was resigned to the idea that she would never escape this world. But fate had other plans. Isabelle had been running late. The flowers were beautifully arranged, delicate petals wrapped in a ribbon, ready to be delivered to her most important client of the month. She had no choice but to hurry. Her shop was hanging on by a thread, and this was her only shot to make a meaningful sale. With a sigh, she grabbed the bouquet, double-checked the address on the order, and rushed out the door, hoping she could make it before the evening rush. The elevator ride up to the 20th floor felt long, each passing moment a reminder of how small and insignificant she felt. She didn't belong in places like this, high-rise apartments with sleek, modern finishes, where the air was thick with success and wealth. But she couldn't afford to feel out of place. Not today. Not when the future of her shop depended on this delivery. The doors slid open with a soft chime, and Isabelle stepped out, glancing at the hallway that stretched out in front of her. Everything looked the same. Clean, quiet, pristine. She checked the address one more time. Yes, this was the place. But as she walked toward the penthouse door, something strange happened. She felt a pang of uncertainty. The number on the door, 31, wasn't the same as the one on her order. She froze for a second, the bouquet slipping slightly in her hands. She checked the slip again. 31. A mix-up. Maybe it was just a mistake. She wasn't sure, but she figured it wouldn't hurt to deliver the flowers anyway. The worst thing that could happen was a polite apology and a redirection to the correct penthouse. So, she knocked. The door opened. Aitos, moment later, revealing a man in a crisp, perfectly tailored suit. His face was sharp, defined, with eyes that were cold, calculating, like a man who had seen everything the world had to offer, but still found himself searching for something more. Nathaniel Carrington. Isabelle's breath caught in her throat. She had seen him before. His face was plastered across billboards, in magazines, even on the occasional news story. Nathaniel Carrington, tech mogul, billionaire, philanthropist. The man who seemed to have everything: wealth, influence, power, control. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice smooth, yet carrying a subtle weight of authority. His eyes flickered to the bouquet she held, then back to her. "I'm sorry," Isabelle stammered, feeling her heart race. "I believe these flowers are meant for someone else on the 20th floor. I must have gotten the floor wrong." He raised an eyebrow, but then, to her surprise, smiled. "It's all right. Why don't you come in while we sort this out? You've come all this way. No need to rush off." Isabelle hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to run. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be at the 20th floor, not the 31st. She was supposed to be in her own world, not in the presence of someone like him. But something about his invitation, his warm, welcoming tone, drew her in. She wasn't sure why, but she stepped inside. The penthouse was nothing like she imagined. It was more than just beautiful. It was extravagant. Modern art on the walls, expensive furniture placed just so. The scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. It was the kind of space that made her feel like an intruder, like she didn't belong. Nathaniel led her to a plush couch, gesturing for her to sit. "Can I offer you something to drink while we figure this out?" he asked, his eyes fixed on her with a curiosity that made her feel both nervous and oddly at ease. Isabelle shook her head, still trying to steady her racing heart. "I am fine. Thank you. Really, I should get going." "I've made a mistake." But Nathaniel wasn't having it. "It's not every day that someone like you walks into my life," he said, his voice laced with something like intrigue. "Why don't you stay for a while? It's not every day that I meet someone who isn't afraid to make a mistake." Isabelle opened her mouth to protest, but something inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time, urged her to stay. Maybe it was the way he spoke to her, or maybe it was the chance to escape her mundane reality, even if just for a few minutes. She sat down, her hands still clutching the bouquet. Nathaniel didn't seem in a hurry to get the situation resolved. Instead, he offered her a drink again, and this time, she accepted. "I'm hosting a gala tonight," Nathaniel said after a few moments, his voice casual, but with an edge of something else. "You should come. I'll send you an invitation. You deserve to be part of something different for once." Isabelle blinked, caught off guard. A gala? She had never been to anything like that. The very idea of it seemed so foreign. But before she could gather her thoughts, he added, "Consider it a reward for your unintentional adventure tonight. You've made it all the way up here after all. Might as well enjoy the view. Isabelle didn't know what possessed her. Maybe it was the allure of something beyond her reach. Maybe it was his calm, commanding presence. But she found herself agreeing. "All right," she said softly. "I'll go." And just like that, the path she had been walking on for years, one of routine, of sacrifice, shifted. And that's when everything began to change. The gala was everything Isabelle expected, and everything she feared. She had imagined it would be a world of elegance, of perfect smiles and flawless conversations, but standing at the entrance, she realized she was standing at the edge of a world she couldn't possibly understand. Nathaniel's world. Her borrowed gown clung to her in all the wrong places, and her hands were slick with nervous sweat as she stepped into the ballroom, which was bathed in the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. The air smelled like expensive perfume and expensive secrets. Guests mingled, sipping champagne, their laughter floating above the sound of classical music. And there, at the center of it all, was Nathaniel, effortlessly commanding the attention of the room, surrounded by a crowd of well-dressed, polished people who looked like they had never known struggle. Isabelle felt like a ghost, a shadow in a world full of bright, perfect lights. She stood off to the side, her chest tight, watching as Nathaniel spoke to his colleagues, his smile never faltering, his presence a magnetic pull for those around him. And it wasn't long before she saw her, the woman standing by his side, a perfect figure in a sleek black dress, a woman whose beauty was more refined, more practiced than Isabelle's could ever be. It was Caitlin, Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend. Isabelle had heard rumors of her, stories of the perfect woman who had once been the one at Nathaniel's side, the one who seemed to fit into his world like a missing piece. But there she was, standing in the glow of the gala, looking every bit the part of the woman who had never left Nathaniel's world. As Caitlin approached, her eyes flicked over Isabelle with a look that was anything but warm. It was a look of someone who knew exactly where Isabelle belonged, and it wasn't in Nathaniel's life. "So, you're the florist?" Caitlin asked, her voice dripping with a condescension that cut through the air like a knife. Nathaniel's found himself a new distraction. "I see." Isabelle's pulse raced as she faced Caitlin, the words lodged in her throat. She hadn't expected this. The underlying hostility was clear, and Isabelle couldn't help but feel small, out of place, a stranger in this world where she clearly didn't belong. "I didn't know Nathaniel needed distractions," Isabelle said, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. "Oh, he doesn't," Caitlin replied, her lips curling into a sly smile. "But he's always had a thing for the underdog, hasn't he?" She glanced over at Nathaniel, who was talking to someone else now, oblivious to the tension simmering between them. "It's funny, really," Caitlin continued, "how he always seems to pick people who will never quite fit in, people who are far below his station. But that's Nathaniel, always playing the hero for someone in need." Isabelle's cheeks burned with the weight of Caitlin's words, but she refused to back down. She'd been through too much to let this woman's words break her. "I'm not looking for a hero," Isabelle said quietly, the words sharper than she intended. "I don't need anyone to save me. I'm fine on my own." For a moment, Caitlin's expression flickered. Surprise, then something darker, something almost pitying. She took a slow step forward, her voice low, a little too sweet. "You may be fine now, but Nathaniel has not someone you can just step into and out of. Has not some knight in shining armor. He's complicated." Isabelle's heart skipped in her chest. "I don't need to know his whole life story," she said, trying to sound dismissive, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "You should," Caitlin pressed, stepping closer, her eyes narrowing slightly, Because one day, you'll realize you're just another person who doesn't fit in his perfect little world. You'll realize that no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you'll never be enough for someone like him. Her words hit harder than Isabelle could have anticipated. She felt the air around her grow thick, suffocating. Was that the truth? Was she just a distraction, a momentary lapse in Nathaniel's perfect life? Was she just another fleeting shadow in a world that demanded brilliance and polish? Before Isabelle could respond, she felt a presence behind her. Nathaniel. His hand gently rested on her shoulder, his touch grounding her. "What's going on here?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that Isabelle had never heard before. Caitlin stepped back, her gaze softening for a moment, but only momentarily. "Oh, nothing," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just telling Isabelle here a little bit about the reality of life in your world. It can be unforgiving, don't you think?" Isabelle turned, facing Nathaniel, feeling both exposed and protected by his presence. The quiet strength he exuded was comforting, but something in his eyes was different tonight, distant. Was it because of Caitlin, or because of something else? Nathaniel's hand lingered on her shoulder before he pulled back, the distance between them widening in a way that made Isabelle's heart race with confusion. But the biggest revelation was still to come. The evening carried on in a haze, the words Caitlin had spoken lingering like an uncomfortable truth that Isabelle couldn't shake. Every glance Nathaniel gave her, every gesture, felt heavy now, as if the weight of expectations hung between them. The warmth of the gala had dimmed, replaced by the cold realization that there was more to Nathaniel's life than she had ever known. Things he hadn't shared with her. Things he might never. They stood by the balcony, the city lights twinkling below, casting a soft glow on their faces. Isabelle stared out at the horizon, unsure of what to say, how to bridge the growing distance between them. The night was beautiful, but it felt empty now, as if the glamour had been stripped away, leaving behind only the truth. Nathaniel's voice cut through the silence. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't expect this to happen tonight. I never thought Caitlin would." Isabelle turned to face him, her heart pounding. "What is it that you never thought would happen, Nathaniel?" Her voice trembled, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Nathaniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You deserve the truth, Isabelle. About Caitlin. About me." He paused, his eyes darkening with something that could have been regret or shame. "The truth is, I've always been running from it, from everything, from the pressure, from the life I've built around me, and from the parts of me that I've tried to keep hidden." Isabelle's breath caught. "What do you mean?" she asked, her heart racing, a sense of dread creeping up her spine. Nathaniel hesitated, his eyes shifting away from hers. "I have children, Isabelle. 2 of them. A son and a daughter. I've never told anyone. Caitlin knows, but no one else does." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Children? Nathaniel, the man she had come to know as perfect, as untouchable, had hidden something so personal, so important. "They're my biggest regret," he confessed, his voice cracking. "I wasn't there for them when they needed me the most, and when I tried to make up for it, I lost my family. I lost everything." Isabelle stood frozen, her thoughts spinning. She hadn't expected this. She had thought Nathaniel was a man of simple desires, wealth, success, control. But there was so much more beneath the surface, so much hidden behind the walls he had built. Her mind raced as she processed the revelation. Nathaniel's life, his wealth, his charm. It was all a fraud. Beneath it, he was broken, torn apart by choices he had made, by sacrifices he hadn't known how to undo. And for the first time in weeks, Isabelle felt a growing uncertainty. What was she doing? Was she chasing a life that wasn't hers to have? Was she losing sight of her own priorities for a man who had yet to face his own demons? And that was when he realized what truly mattered. The days that followed the revelation about Nathaniel's children were filled with an uneasy quiet. Isabelle could feel the distance between them grow, not just physically, but emotionally. Nathaniel had shown her parts of himself she hadn't known existed, but with those truths came a weight that neither of them had been prepared for. Isabelle threw herself into the flower shop, determined to focus on rebuilding what had been slipping away for so long. Every flower she arranged, every order she filled, became a small victory, a step forward in reclaiming the life she had almost forgotten how to live. Yet, even as she immersed herself in work, her mind kept returning to Nathaniel, the man who had told her so much, but still hadn't told her everything. She tried reaching out to him, calling, texting, but his responses were few, measured. There were moments when they would meet, when they would talk, but they felt more like strangers than the people who had shared a moment of connection. Nathaniel was still carrying the weight of his past, and Isabelle realized she was doing the same. Her past, her sacrifice, her fears, kept her anchored in a life she wasn't sure she could leave behind. One evening, Nathaniel invited her to dinner, a small attempt to bridge the gap. As they sat across from each other, the tension was palpable. Isabelle tried to open up, to ask the right questions, but Nathaniel kept retreating into himself. He was still hiding, still afraid of being vulnerable. Isabelle knew she couldn't keep pushing him. She couldn't be the one to fix him, to heal the wounds he had buried so deep. She needed to heal, too. But the hardest test was still ahead. The gala was a distant memory now, replaced by a reality neither Isabelle nor Nathaniel had anticipated. The weight of their unspoken fears had grown too heavy to ignore. Everything they had tried to rebuild seemed to crumble when Nathaniel's past came rushing back in the form of an unexpected phone call. Isabelle was standing in the shop, arranging a bouquet of lilies, when she heard Nathaniel's voice at the door. His face was pale, his eyes stormy with emotion. "Isabelle, we need to talk," he said, his voice tight, as though the words were choking him. Before she could respond, he was already walking towards her, his every step filled with an urgency she hadn't seen before. "I didn't think it would come to this," Nathaniel continued, his voice strained. "But they're here. My kids. They're here." Isabelle's heart skipped a beat. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy fog. Nathaniel's children, his real family, were standing at the door of the shop. The people who had been the catalyst for everything he had kept hidden. He ran a hand through his hair, a frustrated sigh escaping him. "I've been running from this. I thought I could make everything right without facing it. But now, they want to see me. They want to know the truth." Isabelle stood frozen, her heart aching as she saw the vulnerability in Nathaniel's eyes. He wasn't the polished, untouchable man she had first met. He was a father, torn between the life he had built and the family he had abandoned. With trembling hands, Isabelle reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "You don't have to do this alone," she whispered. Nathaniel turned to her, his eyes full of emotion. "I've hurt them, Isabelle. I've hurt you. I don't know how to fix it." Isabelle took a deep breath, her heart breaking for him. "We start by being honest. No more running." Nathaniel nodded slowly, his resolve hardening. Nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days felt like a blur. Nathaniel took the first steps toward rebuilding the bridge with his children. Isabelle watched from the sidelines, unsure of where she fit into this new chapter of his life, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't stand still. She had her own healing to do. Nathaniel, however, had changed. He was no longer the man who hid behind wealth and status. He was the man who was willing to face the consequences of his choices, the man who was finally ready to embrace the family he had abandoned. Isabelle decided to take a step toward him, too. The day she first walked into the shop after their intense conversation felt like the first breath she had taken in months. The flowers, fresh, vibrant, were a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was beauty. She smiled at the small progress she had made in her own journey. The shop, the flowers, the community, her mother's legacy, had never been more important. That afternoon, Nathaniel came by, looking nervous but determined. "I'm going to visit them," he told her, his voice uncertain but hopeful. "It's been too long." Isabelle smiled softly. "I think it's time." Later that evening, Nathaniel returned, but this time there was a different light in his eyes, a warmth, a peace. "They're open to seeing me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've got a long way to go, but am willing to try." Isabelle's heart swelled as she stepped closer to him, reaching out to take his hand. "You don't have to do it alone," she whispered. For the first time, Nathaniel didn't pull away. He squeezed her hand tightly, his eyes filled with gratitude, and something more: hope, love, the possibility of a future. The future they would build, together, one step at a time. And as they stood there, hand in hand, both of them understanding the weight of what lay ahead, they knew that this was just the beginning of something real. A second chance, a new beginning. For Isabelle, it wasn't about fitting into Nathaniel's world. It was about creating their own world, a world built on honesty, healing, and love, together.